So, hearing other conversation and questions, we'll move on to item 12, Jesse Goodman with the Farm Committee.
Okay, our committee met Monday there, and we had Nicole explain this ordinance 21. Did everybody get this in their packet, or you did? Okay. So if you read it, the way she feels, that gives us the right to rent the county farm. We talked about how we would rent it, and we would take bids, do a cash bid. And so I guess what I'm asking, if everybody has read this, I'd like to have a motion to accept that ordinance 21.
Brian Kaufman makes a motion. Gary Patterson makes a second. The motion on the floor is to pass ordinance 21, ordinance to lease the county farm pursuant to ILCS 55-5/5-1049.2. Now I had in my board packet, I had two different copies.
Yeah, that, if that passes, and then we gotta have some discussion and make a motion on how we would select the bidder on the farm lease. We discussed that in our committee. We've been advertised, and I talked to Jessica yesterday, and she gave me the dates that newspapers publish and would get out. And we was wanting to have the bids done by the 20th. And that's our, kind of the problem there, so I'd like some discussion on how we're gonna get these bids out. We're running a lot of a time crunch here, because I drove up there about 2.5 weeks ago to look at the farm. We had some rain, and I was able to get away, and it didn't look too bad. But I went out there today, and it's a rabbit getting lost out there today. It needs some attention. So we need to decide on this, get some bids, and we decided on beginning June 1st, but I would say after we got the bids decided on and who's gonna do it, maybe release it a little before that, so they can get it burned down or tillage or whatever we want the farm to do.
Yeah, can we go through?
And on taxes, they will be charged the real estate taxes for the 21 year there, but they're not payable in 22. We agreed on that.
Would you go through the venue in which this came about? The ILCS 55-5-5. Can you
Would you want to
explain that?
explain the legal part of that, Nicole?
Sure. I sent the entire board a written opinion regarding this, and I'll explain it also. 55 ILCS 5/5-1049.2 is a statute in the county's code. I think everyone was aware of it, it just wasn't clear exactly why that statute was passed or what situations it applies to. The statute reads that the county board may lease real estate acquired or held by the county for any term not exceeding 99 years and may lease the real estate when, in the opinion of the county board, the real estate is no longer necessary, appropriate, required for the use of, profitable to, or for the best interests of the county. The authority to lease shall be exercised by an ordinance passed by 3/4 of the county board members then holding office at any regular meeting or at any special meeting called for that purpose. However, the county board may authorize any county officer to make leases for terms not exceeding 2 years in a manner determined by the board. There are no cases that interpret that statute. There are no attorney general opinions, either formal or informal, who have discussed it. I even called the attorney general's office to make sure there wasn't an informal one that I was missing. No one's ever written an opinion about it. So I obtained the transcript of the legislative debate that occurred at the time that this law was passed to determine what the intent of the legislature was when this bill was introduced, voted on, and passed. When you read the statute, it is not clear if they intended it to apply to the public purpose of producing revenue for the county. When it's unclear, you can look at the transcript and determine what the legislative intent was. This bill was passed in 1993. When I attempted to obtain copies of the transcripts, they had never been typed up or prepared, so it took 5 or 6 weeks to get that done. That was the reason for the delay in it. I did not have these transcripts the last time that the county board met. I obtained the transcripts and emailed them to the county farm committee on April 23rd and explained what the statute is. It deals with Public Act 88-526, which turned into Senate Bill 95, which I've emailed everyone the charts to show that that Public Act and that Senate bill match up. And then I emailed everyone the pages of the transcript of the debate for Senate Bill 95. So it goes with this statute that I just read. During the floor debate, the questions were asked, quote, "You said the land being released to the government or to a private individual." This is a case that involved Kankakee County had surplus property that they wanted to rent. That was the reason that the bill was originally drafted. And one of the senators, state senators asked, "You said the land being released to the government or a private individual?" Meaning, are they going to release the land to a government entity, or are they going to release and allow to be leased to a private individual? He repeats, "Is this going to a government agency or a private individual?" And the response from one of the bill sponsors was, "My understanding is the language is drafted so they can lease either to a government agency or to private interests that may be interested in additional office space." And they said, quote, "They see this as an opportunity to gain additional revenue." So the benefit to the county in that case was that Kankakee County was permitted to lease its land to a private individual so that the county could generate additional revenue. So the transcript shows that the intent of the state legislature at the time this bill was passed was to permit a county to lease county-owned real estate to private interests in order to generate additional revenue for the county. The bill was passed and it applies to every county in the state of Illinois. They did not limit it to any one particular county or any county by population. It applies to all of us, including Shelby County. And I know questions have arisen regarding, is generating public revenue a public purpose? And that's a fair question, and I understand why people wonder and ask about that. What the General Assembly essentially decided during its debates, it indicates that their intent is that putting otherwise unused property to use in order to generate revenue rather than lie in waste is a public purpose that supports the operation of government. Here, if we do not lease the farmland, it's wasteful to the county. We have to take care of it. It's going to cost us money. It is not useful to the county. So we are in a position where if we do not lease it or license it or earn money from it, it's not worth keeping it anymore. And that's exactly what this statute was passed for situations like this. And I understand how there's a question of, is generating revenue a public purpose? The Illinois Supreme Court has said, quote, "It has been repeatedly held that what is a public purpose is a question within the discretion of the legislature. The legislature exercised its discretion when it passed this bill, and they said, quote, "It is to generate revenue for the county."
Good job. Yes, ma'am. Good.
I cannot control when the Attorney General is going to come back with their opinion. I have called them 4 or 5 times. We're not going to have their opinion before planting season. We're up to the wire right now, so.
The case that you're talking about was dealing with excess offices in their building they wanted to lease out.
No, I believe it was land, but someone wanted to build on it to generate office space, is the way I read it.
Okay, I misread that because I assumed it was just extra office space that they no longer needed. And rather than let it sit empty in the building they were using, they were given, I need clarification on that. That needs a big step.
It's
from
land, it says,
farmland.
you said the land being released to the government, it's not farmland, but it said, you said the land being released to the government or private individual. They talk kind of casually, but that was the quote. Is this going to a governmental agency or a private individual? They're talking about land. And then they said it's to private interests. They see this as an opportunity to gain some additional revenue.
But did it say something on office space though?
I believe that was the reason, let's see, let me find it. Yeah, that they may be interested in additional office space. I sent the whole transcript that talked about it. It wasn't really clear exactly in detail what they were leasing. But that the way I read it, they say it's land, and they said they need additional office space. And what the statute says is the county may lease real estate. That makes me also believe they're talking about land specifically. It's a statute that deals with land. The county board may lease real estate, acquired or held by the county for any term. You can't do it longer than 99 years, so you cannot lease forever. There's a limit to it. So, and that's if, and it has to be 3/4 of the vote, which is 17 votes, would have to say yes. The county board would have to find that the real estate is no longer necessary, appropriate, required for the use of, profitable to, or for the best interest of the county. Our farmland is not profitable to us if it sits.
Girl, what's the, why do we keep looking at, why don't we sell this stuff and move on?
Well, you can, that's an option, but this is another option.
We've been beating this to death, we sell it, move on, have the money being invested.
You won't make as much for you.
What are you gonna make per year?
40?
30 to 40.
How much?
This year may get close to 40, but it's year in, year out, been around 30.
How much you get about $2 million?
No, acres that is not even farmable.
You sell it off in sections?
Pretty much.
I can remember when this county board got a couple $1 million in coal rights, we're not gonna today, it's gone. That's what would happen if you sold that farm.
The courthouse. Right here at the courthouse.
But it's gone.
Right here.
He talking about investment,
Where would you build the courthouse? How do you repair the courthouse?
right? With the 50,000 a year you can use.
We just said 30 over there.
About 10 million.
30 to 40.
Lynn?
I think we need to vote on this. I think, Jesse, we're losing track on this. Jesse went out there and he says a rabbit could get lost. We need to move on this, and with Nicole stating that you can have office, but also land was included on that, to my understanding. We need to get moving on this, or what Gary Patterson said, it could be less than $30,000 or $40,000. It could be less money.
But if it cost us 10.
Where do we get into public use at? How do we get around that?
The public use would be to generate revenue. And that's what the legislative intent was. They are saying in that transcript that a public purpose is to generate revenue, and the Illinois Supreme Court gives great deference to what the legislature interprets as a public purpose.
Derek said the same.
Derek, I'll let you finish.
Alright, so I got two main questions, I guess. One, would be, were you able to obtain a copy of the KMP lease, whatever that was intended to be used for? Did they go through with that? Was it actually used? What did they lease, or did that,
They approved it. I don't have their lease, but the statute covers real estate.
did it get used for what they supposedly intended it for, and was that ever challenged or not, I guess?
It was never challenged because the statute has never been decided, never been challenged in court
So we
or
don't
by the
know-
Attorney General's
We don't know if
office.
Kankakee actually used that.
I don't know, but that would be irrelevant. It was passed. If they changed their mind and decided not to use it, it doesn't change the meaning of the statute.
Second question, I guess, on the bid process, and I'm just going off from memory, I felt like there was a 30-day bid process, but I can't remember how that works. Does anybody remember?
I don't know what the right.
The
way for-
the bidding would have to be done in a newspaper, either published in the county or circulated within the county, if none is published within the county. And that brings me to the explanation of the ordinances. There are two versions. The first version is the county board giving permission, primarily because of the timeline we're in with farming season, to permit the farming committee to select the bidder. And that is specifically permitted within the statute that I read. The last sentence states, the county board may authorize any county officer to make leases for terms not exceeding 2 years in a manner determined by the board. What the farming committee voted on was to have the lease apply from June 1st of this year until February 28th of next year, so it'd be less than 1 year. So if 3/4 of the board approves that, then the intent would be that the farm committee would permit the bid process to proceed and have a committee, a specially set meeting next Thursday is what we discussed. If that version of the ordinance fails, then up for consideration would be the second version, where it states that the Shelby County Board would determine who the lease should go to based on the bidding process. You would need a special meeting if you want to get it in before the farming season, and you can do that by 1/3 of the board voting on that. Or you can leave it till the next meeting, June 10th, but I think as we discussed at the farm committee meeting, that would be too late. So the easiest way to proceed if this is passed would be to go with the first version and let the farm committee decide on who the bid goes to. And this doesn't even have to be bid, this is not a service we're bidding on. Farming committee thought it would be more fair to the public if you gave more than one person a chance to have this lease, and we would hopefully gain more money from it. Whoever would be chosen is responsible for the taxes, and that is included within the lease agreement.
How does that work on the tax if we're paying the tax a year behind?
It does not address and cannot address the last 2 years, because the farmer who obtained the lease last 2 years was never required to pay the lease. But for this year, moving forward, we have added that language to the lease agreement that that farmer would be responsible for paying taxes on the tillable acreage. The acreage that is not tillable, we would be entitled to file for a tax exemption, and it would be granted because it's not being used or being leased by a private party.
Bob, go ahead.
What's the rest of the committee feel on this? I know you supported it the other day, what's your thoughts now?
We beat this horse, we can't understand that anymore.
So you're still in support of what you voted on Monday?
To bring it to the board,
Yeah.
we'll go up to the board.
That's what you voted on, no support, bring it to the board. You didn't, your vote wasn't to support.
No, I just brought it to the board.
Hey, Nicole, what did we vote on a month ago, 2 months ago? Didn't we vote on the lease agreement?
The licensing agreement was approved by the majority of the board. The licensing agreement was approved. But then when we got to the portion where we had Jim Shorman here and we had the agency agreement voted on, that was not approved. So there was no way to really go forward with the licensing agreement because he was not given permission to obtain finances for us to front the money for the crops. And there was never a motion made to amend the budget to pay for it. So we had upfront money for the licensing agreement. We were paying for the crops. We would be hiring somebody to plant them, and then we would get 100% of the proceeds.
Licensing is not leasing, correct?
No, licensing is you're giving someone a lesser interest in the land than you would be with leasing. And that's why I recommended it. The leasing was unclear. Licensing is giving less of an interest to the, in that case, licensor. And it was approved, but it was not voted on where we could actually implement it. So then I got these transcripts, this is another way to do it.
Mark?
I would like to clarify a question that Gary asked, and this is on the transcript, it's highlighted that Nicole did. He asked about a vacant building. I quote, Kankakee County has acquired a new county building a number of years ago. They have excess office space. They see this as an opportunity to gain some additional revenue. It is not on the space.
That's in the transcript I gave you?
Yes, ma'am.
And it's also,
It's
Grant-
on, it's got
That's what it is.
behind that right-hand corner.
Okay.
but what they were referencing was a building that was a county office building that they had excess space in. So the building itself was a public use building that they were using the excess space to lease out. So they determined public use by it being a public building.
I thought it was land.
No,
This-
It mentions land in the green.
it's real estate.
Bill,
It's real estate is what they talked about.
It mentions land in the transcripts also, and then it does, the statute applies to real estate, so that would include land. It's not limited to office space. The statute is not limited.
But they determined public use on it.
Whether it's office space or land is not relevant. Property is property, real estate.
Public use, it just says real
No,
estate.
no, that's correct. The statute doesn't, but
So,
Article 8 of the Constitution does. So that's where I'm hemmed up, is if you're gonna follow the statute and the Constitution, you gotta mix the two together to prove public use for anything. And then it says you can lease it, but you gotta prove public use.
You cannot lease for a private purpose, but the way the legislature is defining it is generating revenue is a public purpose. So if you're leasing to a private entity for a public purpose, you would be leasing to a private farmer so that the county could generate revenue, and the Illinois Supreme Court defers to the legislature in defining what a public purpose is. The Illinois legislature in this statute defined a public purpose as generating revenue.
Question?
One thing, I'm sitting there and listening to all this, Nicole's given us her opinion, I mean, she's the attorney for the county, she's telling us we can do this, so why are we beating this to death? Let's just vote on it and be done with it, I mean,
Any
how
other
would you not
discussion?
how would you not wanna have a tenant on their farming?
Any other discussion? Yeah.
Yeah, what's gonna cost us to leave that empty? Nothing?
We talked about that at the farming committee, and there was, Jesse would know that, because you have to take care of the land, it costs money to keep it, and not lease it or
What was his
license
question?
it.
What would it cost us to do? Nothing.
Why don't you wanna just do that?
approximately $15,000, give or take.
Then you gotta see it, so.
And that's coming out of the general fund. As long as you know that.
You know, how would it come out of general fund if you're doing nothing with it? Just sit
Well, there's
there.
certain things that noxious weed,
Yeah.
law in the state of Illinois, and if there's noxious weeds that come up in that, they can come after us, so you have to maintain the property and keep the weeds down.
There's probably about 5 farming neighbors there.
Yeah.
They'd probably all be in here.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. But,
Because that seed goes out in their fields too.
You ready to vote? Wait, no, hold on.
So you're saying, Nicole, that the legislature considers money earned from this lease would be, but because it goes into the county treasury, is public use?
Yes. An opportunity to gain some additional revenue was the quote.
So you're gonna call a vote? So we are voting on Resolution 21, which is the first one or the second?
The first one ends, under the be it resolved paragraph, gives the Shelby County Farm Committee permission, it says, to the highest responsible bidder to be selected by the Shelby County Farm Committee. And for that to pass, 17 votes need to be yes. That's 3/4 of the board.
So, just so I know where we're going, passes, we use this one, if it doesn't, then we go to the other one and vote on it.
Correct.
Okay. So, the big difference between two ordinances is the very last line, like you said. The first one we're gonna vote on is that the farm committee will have the responsibility of selecting the highest responsible bidder.
Is that the first one or the second one?
That's the first one. Yeah.
Yeah, the first
that's
one
the first one.
gives permission to the Farm Committee.
So the big difference between the two copies that we have is who delegates the tendency.
First question.
Yeah, we had.
Is the first vote to vote on the lease?
We're talking about the motions here.
Huh?
Why would you not
Ordinance
vote on
for
the
the
lease?
vote on the lease.
Lease, you wouldn't have to vote on it.
If it's vote on the lease, you might not have to vote.
Oh, we don't have to.
Backwards, isn't it?
First thing that needs to be voted on is whether or not this ordinance is going to be passed, and the way I drafted it, it quotes the statute that,
So we're gonna vote on the ordinance, and then we'll go to the next part. Anyway, we're, you wanna take a roll call vote or?
yes, yes.
Okay, roll call vote.
Chairman, can you repeat it one more time? We're not voting to lease the property, we're voting to.
We're voting on the ordinance that would allow the farm committee to select the highest responsible bidder.
Not the lease. That wasn't.
It is a vote to lease.
Well, it's lease too, lease and
To lease, my vote was to lease the ground.
It's a motion,
Well, Jesse had the floor with the discussion on lease, on
The
the,
first line there, discussion of voting on leasing of the county on this ordinance.
And I make a motion to lease the farm,
Yeah, we haven't voted on that
and
yet.
Gary seconded that, so that should be what the vote is.
it would be to lease the farm pursuant to the statute I cited, and also to give the farming committee the authority to choose the highest responsible bidder.
okay, so it's all inclusive.
Okay. I just have one question. I know everybody's throwing questions out, but can we do that in one motion, or does it have to be two motions?
It's
One.
within one
it's-
ordinance. It's within one ordinance,
It's within one, okay.
yes.
So we can do both of these at the same time?
The first ordinance is you're agreeing that the land can be leased pursuant to the statute I cited, and that the Shelby County Board is given authority to choose the highest responsible bidder,
The farm committee.
the farm committee. Okay, if that fails, then we would consider the second ordinance, and it's exactly the same, except it requires a vote of the entire county board to choose the highest responsible bidder.
Well, we got a motion.
But if it's turned down, you don't have to vote.
Don?
Why don't we get, Brian and whoever seconded to withdraw their motion and say that we want to pass ordinance number 21, which is basically what he's saying.
That's what we said.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Ordinance 21 is leasing.
Okay, that's fine.
With the committee.
Instead of arguing about, just say we want to pass ordinance 21.
Yes.
But the problem is, they're both ordinance 21. They're
We're gonna need to add a number to it, I defer to Jessica on
They're gonna get
that.
an ordinance number. 21's the year, and then it will be assigned an ordinance number, just so everyone understands that.
But we're moving for the one with the farm committee.
Yes, that's the
Why
one.
don't we say version A, and then the other one can be version B?
Can I
It doesn't
make
get a
motion
number
to
until it's
include it as
passed.
Version A. I made my motion to make it a version A.
And I second that.
Amendment, and second. All right, we'll take a roll call vote.
Earl Baker,
No.
Kenny Barr,
Yes.
Barbara Bennett,
Yes.
Mark Bennett,
No.
Paul Candidate,
No.
Brian Kaufman,
Yes.
Danny Gurvich,
Yes.
Jesse Durbin,
Yes.
Gary Gergany,
No.
Rod Hyde,
Yes.
Larry Lenz,
Yes.
Pat Lyons,
No.
Terry Metzger,
Yes.
Bobby Orman,
No.
Gary Patterson,
Yes.
You can quit.
Derek Piercy,
No.
John Poe, Robert Simpson,
Yes.
Jeff Slifer,
Yes.
David Switch,
Yes.
Don Tate,
Yes.
Lynn Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries 14 ayes to 8 nays. You're right, so motion does not carry, because it had to be 17.
What was the names? How many?
There were 8 nays, and it had to be 3/4, which was 17 of the 22, correct?
You need 17 of the 22 to
Yes.
say yes.
So,
Up next, we move on to committee reports. Any committees like reports?
Wait a minute, I'll make the other motion, do option 2 of ordinance 21.
I'll second.
Same discussion. The only difference is, it's the farm committee makes the selection, or the highest responsible bidder to be selected by the county board, the whole board.
My motion is for the county board to pick it.
Right.
There's no need to vote on that, because it's not passed.
Well, we have a motion in a
It's all
second.
one. The leasing and who picks the bidder is all one motion. It's 21 is in your packet. She sent it in writing, and it's all one thing, the leasing and who picks the renter.
They just explained it. The difference was the farm committee or the whole county vote. If you'd have listened,
For what? You voted for.
we'll still have to vote for both of them. Lease it. If you would just listen.
Vote it down.
No, it was voted down to lease and the farm committee to do the vote, to do the, now it's the leasing and the county board. There's two things.
So, motion by Gary, seconded by Jeff. Any other discussion? This is, the difference is the first version or version B.
What are we voting for?
It's to lease the farm based on decision of the county board versus the committee. The first vote was on the committee, now we're going to the same lease determined by the board.
The county board would pick the farmer instead of the committee picking the farmer.
I think it's a travesty on this board at this moment in time. For 6, 7 months, you people stood here and sat here and said, we can't vote on anything because we do not have representation. We have great representation now. She's brought 2 to 3 proposals to us to get this thing corrected and done correctly. You're still not listening to our state's attorney.
Exactly.
And you are still doing the same thing. You're going to say something else, make up another excuse for it, driven your agenda you want to drive. This is totally incomplete. I can't fathom. I thought people on this board were smarter than that.
You got the option to do anytime you want to.
I can, yes.
We're gonna vote for where you need to vote.
I understand that. But I'm just telling you, when we sat here, and you weren't one of them here at that time, everybody said we don't have representation. We have damn good representation now, and nobody's following.
I've been saying from the beginning, sell the ground.
Yeah, but that's ignorant. You don't sell farm ground. Why would you sell your farm ground, Earl? That's stupid.
Call the vote.
Earl Baker,
Hold on. Yes, sir.
I just want to reiterate that this is actually going to cost us, leave this set, so you guys are all aware of that. Go back to your districts and explain that.
They sell it still.
Sure you would.
I know it was.
Earl
Okay, now
Baker,
call the vote.
See farmers selling their ground all the time.
Earl Baker,
Vote, Earl. No.
Kenny Barr,
Yes.
Barbara Bennett,
Yes.
Mark Bennett,
No.
Paul Candidate,
No.
Brian Kaufman,
Yes.
Dennis Turnovich,
Yes.
Jesse Durbin,
Yes.
Gary Gergany,
No.
Rod Hyde,
Yes.
Larry Lenz,
Yes.
Pat Lyons,
No.
Terry Metzger,
Yes.
Bobby Warman, Gary Patterson,
Yes.
Derek Piercy,
No.
John Poe,
No.
Robert Simpson,
Yes.
Jeff Slifer,
Yes.
David Swix,
Yes.
Don Tate,
Yes.
Lynn Williams.
Yes.
Once again, 14-8.
What's the point of having state's attorneys and not pay attention?
Well, and I'll just say it passed unanimously at the farm committee, and I don't really know what happened between then and now.
We didn't take a vote to pass this lease and farm, I just have to reiterate that. We voted to bring it to the board. That's all.
It's recorded, people can listen.
That's all.